So in the spirit of banging pots and making noise to support our frontline workers, I'm officially doing that with the gavel. We're trying to keep it away from the speaker of my computer. Okay, so welcome everyone, and I do wish to begin by recognizing that although we're meeting virtually, we are indeed on the territory of the Sauk Nation. So wonderful to see everyone here, and it's great just to get back into our regular council meetings. So please note that while we are on Zoom, the regular council procedures apply. So this means that everyone has the opportunity to speak twice on any item for a 10-minute maximum. So you could use it 9 minutes and then a minute, 5 and 5, that is up to you. In terms of how we're going to do this, I'm going to start for discussion just in an alphabetical order, but we'll move down to the next person to lead off on every conversation and just sort of go in cycles so that it's not always Councillor Bateman that has to go first. The next item will go to Councillor Beddoes and Councillor Lajeunesse-Loggins, and then in order. So I'm going to follow what the Capital Regional District does and just ask that everyone be muted at all times unless you wish to speak. And then if I hear sort of a noise, that'll sort of indicate, or when we do a vote on something, I'll call for we'll need to do a roll call and hear if you approve or not approve, just so that, because yays and nays can sound exactly the same. So we'll see how that goes, but bear with me because first time for everything, right? Just received a text message from Councillor McMath, and she's working on joining the meeting. She's just resolving a technical difficulty there. Okay, so first item is approval of the agenda. So this is where if you may need to make a sound here because I may not see any gestures, but I did
So moved, Al.
Councillor Beddoes.
Seconded.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes is approved, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Approve.
Opposed?
Approved.
Okay, well, what I'll do is I'll go in favor, and then if I hear noise on an opposed, then we'll work it out. Okay, so carried unanimously. Thank you. Next up is adoption of meeting minutes from our regular council meeting of March the 9th and March 31st special council meetings.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Are there any questions or corrections? Nope. Okay, so seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, it's working. Okay, so next up is report of the Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. McInnes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do not have a report prepared for tonight's meeting.
Okay, thank you. So moving right along to public question and comments. There is just obviously the case, this is our challenge, is having public participation. So in this case, written comments were to be submitted to info@souk.ca prior to noon today, and they would be read out. So I'll turn to our corporate officer to read out any written submissions. Our corporate officer is muted.
Sorry, we did not receive any comments from the public today.
Okay, no comments from the public. Okay, so thank you for that. Into section 7 reports then, and the first one up is 7.1, development procedures during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'll turn this over to Mr. McInnes then to introduce, and then I'll leave it to him to direct it to staff members.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will defer to Mr. Paolo to lead us through this report, and I will chime in if necessary. Matthew?
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is just to provide council with a update as to what processes right now in terms of land use planning are affected from the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there's a number of processes that require public input, while others would require public hearings. So I've outlined in the report what those are. First, starting with our procedures bylaw, number 490. And that states essentially with the bylaw portions for the OCP and the zoning bylaw, those public hearing components. And so like most municipalities across the country right now, public hearings are on hold as they are waiting for further input as to how that can be addressed, just given the isolation requirements, not being able to be in those public gathering areas. So public hearings are essentially on hold. And so with that, that is one bylaw that we indicate where that is affected. As well, there's the development variances and temporary use permit applications that are considered by council. So in terms of a processing timeline, anything that would require council input, that would also be affected by how many times council is meeting during this period. The next one is the development applications procedures policy. Again, we just outlined the OCP amendments, the zoning bylaw amendments, development permits, development variance permits, board of variance permits, agricultural land commission applications, and temporary use permits, all having a public input component. As well, the pre-application meeting, which we would have with many of those application processes, would also be impacted during this time because now applicants aren't able to come to the district office and have a meeting with staff to get that input. So temporarily right now, we're having those opportunities via phone or email with applicants to get information, but this would have to be another workaround that we could further clarify through this process. As I had mentioned previously, the OCP bylaw amendments and the zoning bylaw amendments are those ones with the public hearings that are affected. The development permits, there are those cases where the director of planning and development can make certain provisions to approve specific applications. However, those other ones would have to go to council. So again, potential delay for applicants when that could get on a council agenda. As well, development variance permits would be affected in a similar manner. As well, public input component as well, providing notification to the public of when those meetings would be held for input. And under that as well, the floodplain exemptions could also be impacted, but there are provisions to have that delegated to staff as well, so something that can be looked at. Board of variance permits, again, another meeting component that could be impacted. However, it's noted in the report that a meeting for the Board of Variance hasn't been held since September 2015. So it has been some time, so we're not seeing an immediate impact in that instance, given its last meeting date. Agricultural Land Commission applications. Exclusion applications require that staff notify adjacent neighbors within the 100 meters of the subject property. There's no requirement for public input at a council meeting. With the temporary use permits, again, public hearing component with that one that we could look at. Communications antenna policy. We've mentioned here that there is an intent to put this into another bylaw. So if we're going through this process and examining this one specifically, this would also be an opportune time to consider that inclusion into that policy. And we, again, have that go to a meeting. So again, depending on when those meetings are scheduled, could also have a potential impact. There are certain instances when a zoning application is going forward that if it does comply with the official community plan, that you can waive the public hearing component if it's in compliance with the OCP. So I think there's opportunity there moving forward that if we have those applications that we could exercise that waiver, so at least it wouldn't delay those applications where it was appropriate, demonstrating compliance. As well, we have SUG's bylaw number 705, which does provide delegation authority to the Director of Planning and Development. So there are a number of different types of development permits that fall under that process. In the instances of a minor variance, we could look at other municipalities that have included extended responsibilities for the director to have that delegation to help with the processes rather than sending more applications to council. As well, you'll see with the next report coming after this one for a strata conversion, there is a delegation ability within our procedures. So right now, council is the approving authority for this. However, up until 2012, it had been designated to an officer for that. So there is the opportunity for the council to consider that as a possibility. So given that, what we're suggesting at this point is to have staff report back with a number of amendments based on council's input as to what we can do to help streamline the process and still fall within the guidelines of the Local Government Act. Basically noting at this point, when it comes to public hearings, we'll still wait for further input from the province as to how we can deal with that. But for the other components, if there's opportunity to delegate authority that would essentially be going to council to a designated officer, that we could report back with those opportunities. In terms of budget implication, there isn't anything major at this point, other than the fact that in the long term, the further that we delay in the opportunities to get applications forward with a decision, that could have an impact on revenues for the municipality. So that would be the major component. And with that, that concludes this report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Paolo. I really appreciate this report coming before us today, and just so that we're all aware of how things are happening, and just staff actually just looking ahead and looking at ways to continue to conduct business. So here's where I'm now just going to go in order for councillors for any comments or questions, and if there's nothing, just say pass. But I'd like to have a bit of discussion before we progress to a resolution or a motion. So Councillor Bateman.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Paolo, for your first report. I learned a few things, as I always do, and it looks to me like you're seeking a little more time to work on some strategies moving ahead. I see that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing is developing guidelines to help local governments navigate meeting processes during the pandemic, and you've been receiving those, and I imagine more are to come. And that will help you in terms of creating this next staff report. So I don't have any particular questions, so moving on.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I don't have any particular questions other than it's just such a fluid situation. So the minute we can have some sort of resolution to this, I'm sure the provincial government will let us know procedure. I mean, we're not alone in this, so I'm glad that staff is on it, and they're looking at all possibilities, and they'll be reporting back to us. So I can't ask for any more than that.
Thank you. Councillor Lajeunesse.
Oh, I have nothing to add.
Okay. Councillor Loggins.
Nothing to add. Thank you for the report.
I don't think Councillor McMath has joined us yet. So Councillor St. Pierre.
I actually think it's timely. It'll actually allow our staff to look through our regulations and our rules to determine when we don't have to actually have to come to council, so we can actually streamline our operations. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity in a lot of ways, and I look forward to seeing the results.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. The one piece I'll ask is that we do expect the minister to come out with a suite of options in the not too distant future. Keep in mind that these are developed to accommodate all local governments in BC. So not all of it will fit for us specifically, but at least there's a framework, and then we can adapt accordingly to what works for us, because that's where we get into specific needs. However, the overall framework in terms of public participation, that's something that's shared across. And then how we deal with bylaws with the delegated, sort of on what Councillor St. Pierre said and a few others, just looking to streamline the process and how we delegate authority to staff. This is timely to look at all of this. And it's all good work. So there is a recommendation here, I'll read it out, that council receive the report as for information, and that council directs staff to report back on proposed amendments to planning and development procedures for the purpose of processing applications during the COVID-19 pandemic while maintaining compliance with public health orders and meeting the transparency and accountability of land use and development processes. Do we have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Bateman. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, great, thank you. Moving on then to item 7.2 is the proposed strata title conversion of previously occupied dwellings at 2005 and 2005B Gillespie Road. So I'll turn this over to staff, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is one of the things that Mr. Paolo just alluded to that used to be a delegated duty is now a duty of council. So it has been approved in principle by council in the past, and it's in front of you tonight to get final approval. Matthew, do you have anything else to add?
No, you had mentioned that this was one of the items that I did indicate in the previous report regarding delegations. So just as a good example of something that could be dealt with through staff, if so, based on the report that we bring back to a future meeting.
Okay, very good. Questions from members of council. So we'll start with Councillor Beddoes.
Get that. Well, no, I don't. It looks pretty straightforward. We did approve it in principle, so I don't have a great deal of trouble with it. So I don't really have anything to say that, but I'm willing to move the motion when everybody's had a chance to speak or whatever.
Okay, I'll come back. I'll circle back to you then. Okay, Councillor Lajeunesse.
No, it all looks pretty straightforward to me as well.
Thank you, Councillor Logans.
I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor St. Pierre.
I'm all right too. Pass.
Okay, perfect. Councillor Bateman.
Yes, I'm in favor as well.
Okay, so the recommendation is that council grant final approval for the strata title conversion of previously occupied dwellings on the property legally described as Lot A, Section 71, Soup District Plan, EPP 20458-2005 and 2005B Gillespie Road. Can this be read together? Can these both go together, Ms. Machado? I think so. I'm going to keep going. Yes?
Go ahead.
Okay, and that council authorized the mayor to sign the application to deposit for strata plan EPS 6511 on behalf of the district as approving authority for strata title conversions as per the requirements of the Strata Property Act. So this will be moved by Councillor Beddoes.
So moved.
Okay, and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any questions on the motion or comments? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. Just so you know, Councillor Beddoes, you've disappeared from.
Oh.
Your video has disappeared, so I can't see you. There
How's
you
that?
are.
Well, I
Perfect.
guess it's that big thumb. Hit the mute key, and then I hit the video one beside it. So.
Okay, there we are.
All
Okay.
a learning process.
Next one up is 7.3, the official community plan review RFP update. So back over to staff.
Once again, thank you, Your Worship, and just to Mr. Paolo, your reports that are on the agenda tonight are very well done, so thank you for your efforts, and I ask you to lead council through this report.
Certainly. So we've reached the point now with the OCP review RFP that it has been posted, and so what we're bringing forward to today's meeting is just an update regarding the contents of what is required in the OCP, as well as those discretionary items that we would be looking for, and a few more components that I just want to touch on a little bit further, just to get a good understanding, and for the public to understand also that you know, we're seeking that document that is going to pull in a lot of information and expertise from the community and in the wider area to complete something that's going to be very inclusive of a lot of components that are going to make a stronger community. So based on that, the components that we're looking for in the OCP is you'll see on page 2 of this report, just at the bottom, what it must include in the OCP that we're working to have completed by the consultants is the mapping and statements covering things such as residential development, the housing needs, which we also have a number of needs assessments that have been completed within the district that will roll in as background information, as well as things like greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, regional context statement that's aligned with the CRD's regional growth strategy. And in some instances, we could include in the OCP policies of the local government relating to social needs, social well-being, social development, things respecting farming and agriculture, and related to preservation, protection, restoration, and enhancement of the natural environment, its ecosystem, biological diversity. So what we're looking for is that, as I mentioned, all-inclusive document that we want to put together with a lot of the reports and plans that are being completed either recently or in the works right now, which will be completed during this review process. And so one thing we are mindful of is just based on the current situation right now for most municipalities is the budget implications and how that pans out. And so what we're projecting is that a lot of the background work is going to be completed this year, and a lot of the engagement aspects, which we'll still have to explore as things progress with the pandemic, would come in the following year into 2021, where there would be a much larger budget implication. So we're not seeing any concerns at that point in terms of the budget. What we're looking for is to get this document out, which it is already been posted for the RFP, closing on May 11th. And at that point, very quickly firm up who the consultant is going to be based on our review process. And then from there, just get going, getting as much work as we can based on the guidelines within the isolation parameters. And then from that point, reassess and then see what we can do to further the project. So those are the main points that we want to hit on. But there's a number of plans that are currently completed and ongoing, which will fold into this document. And what we want to stress is when it comes time to gathering all the information, that we have good local knowledge of what's of benefit to the district, and also what are things that are coming forward in the future so that we can roll that in and capitalize on it. So a lot of local knowledge and building community capacity, because those are key points that a lot of municipalities are looking at now, is how can you build from within? And we really think there's a lot of good local knowledge and expertise that we can capitalize on to build those partnerships moving forward. With that, that completes my summary of the report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Paulo, for your report and for your presentation today. Welcome, Councillor McMath. Good to see you.
Do you like my background?
Yes, I do, and we can hear you and see you, so that's perfect. Question to either Mr. McInnes or Mr. Paulo. Where it says here in terms of what an OCP must require, and then where it may require, when do we make that determination? Like, do we need to answer that today, or do we wait until the RFP closes and make the determination down the road?
So my suggestion to council, and Matthew, we haven't had a chance to talk at length on this, but my suggestion is, as we draft the terms of reference for the advisory committee, we really need to understand that it's council that's going to set that framework for those terms of reference. So council, I request that you start thinking about, how broad or how narrow do we want this OCP to reflect the things that must be included as per the Local Government Act, and those things that are discretionary and may be included. I know that since we started talking about this at my interview date, around the ability for OCPs to be too all-encompassing, and anyone can make an argument about the things that are in the OCP for items that they're passionate about. What we talked about early on in my tenure here is the hope that the next OCP is more narrowly focused, and it certainly includes those things that we have to. But I hope we have some significant discussion around the terms of reference and those things that are discretionary and may be included. Anything to add, Matthew?
No, I think we're well positioned. As council is aware, our senior planner did complete an OCP review at their last place of employment, as well as myself. I was just going through the public engagement portions of an OCP with my last employer. So, in terms of in-house expertise, we have staff that are well experienced in the development of OCPs. And I think with the selection of a well-suited consultant, we'll be able to capitalize on those components, as Norm had mentioned, that we must have in the document. But as we go through the background research and the public engagement portions, we'll see other components arise. And from that piece, we'll determine what is appropriate and have that expertise as well on the advisory committee, providing that input as well. So that goes back to that building community capacity piece, where that advisory committee will be very important to highlight to us those components that might not have been on the surface that we're aware of, that we can at least either have other documents that are required that indicate what is necessary, or have policies that point into the proper direction to give the community a better understanding of what we require.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we'll go in order then for councillors, this time starting off with Councillor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, are we required to have a consultant for this, or is it something we can do in-house, given the fact that the economy has slowed and we have a full complement of planning staff now? Maybe we can move a lot of it in-house. And having been involved in the 2010 OCP, there was a lot of public input that went into that document. There were the consultant that we had before hired 2 people to collect data from the community, and they spent like 2 or 3 months collecting information from the public. And I don't think that there will be that much. I don't think the vision will have changed that much if we go to the public for consultation. And I just wonder if it's something like Catherine was involved in the last OCP review. And so she's familiar with everything that went on there. And I'm just wondering if we could move it in-house and save them money for now.
Does staff answer that, Mr. McInnes?
I think there's going to be a balancing act between the skills that we have in-house. And in my experience, the skills around data collection, theming, and writing are skills that are better suited to the private sector. If we want to build the capacity to write a decent report with good graphics, it does require some software. The days of writing reports with Microsoft Publisher, I think, are no longer suit us. So it's really the data collection, the theming of that data, and the writing of the report that I think are better suited to a consultancy. But Matthew, you just went through this process. What are your thoughts?
I think there's benefit in having a consultant assist with the process. Certainly, it's not a process that gets handed off entirely to the consultant, but as Norm had mentioned, they assist in the process, and they have the skill sets that are better suited. They also have the experience of other municipalities that they've worked in, which, like most OCP reviews, as part of the terms of reference and the RFP, we are seeking past experience to determine how successful they were in other projects, because you can learn a lot from other municipalities and how they went through their process. So that usually comes through in those proposals from the consultants, and we'd like to gain that wider knowledge that they could bring to the community.
Okay, does that answer your question or any of your concerns, Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so next up, Councillor Loggins. Questions, comments?
I'm glad to hear that we don't have to make decisions about that today. But in terms of what the OCP may include, I certainly would like to see some information on the third bullet about preservation, protection, restoration, enhancement of natural environment, etc. I know that when staff started doing public consultation a couple of years ago in preparation for the OCP work, that was one of the most important things to the community members. So I feel like it would be appropriate to include that, if not all three, in this project. And I know that we are in a tough time economically at the moment, but we have to consider this is a 10-year plus document before it will be revised again, and it informs many, many years into the future. So any money we put into this project will be certainly be an investment.
Thank you, Councillor Loggins. Councillor McMath.
Hi. I trust the process, and my question is, I feel like Suka's a little bit tired of contributing and then seeing nothing come of it, and then contributing again and seeing nothing of it. So this time, how are you going to retrieve all the past ideas and suggestions that you've captured and not that far away when we started this, just 3 years ago, and show that you still kept it and that you value what they've contributed? Because the consensus from the community, especially the development community, sorry, I'm so tired, work's crazy, is just that they give their ideas and they give their knowledge and they give their content, and then it sort of dies away. Like Randy Clarkson is a good example of someone with that sentiment. He's far from the only person. So as far as engagement goes, how are you going to show the community that you've been listening?
I think there's going to be a key component during the initial startup stages with the background research of assisting the consultant with all those records of information from past engagements and applications and things of that nature that are of value for the consultant to be aware of. And then once they're able to compile all that information, then it would be a reconfirming with the public, are these values still shared amongst the community, or is there a different direction the community is now going towards? So it will have two components to it. One, establishing that baseline of record keeping and identifying to the public that we heard what you said previously, and now we want to reconfirm. And then the second component being taking that direction, whether it's continuing that same direction from the past or going in a different direction based on whatever the response was to that first question of, here's what you said previously, does it still hold true? So that's where the consultant's going to be key at the initial startup.
I think that I'm sort of with you. It's more, what's a good example? What's the group that Herb Haldane was on, and they used to give advice on permitting and bylaws?
Well, there was a land committee, a land use and development committee that was chaired by Councillor Pearson that wound up in 2014. Many of their recommendations came forward in forms of bylaw. So like our building and development bylaw that defines how we charge out DCCs, for example, was all his work. Was all of that committee's work, and that's embedded in a bylaw that we're now having some challenges with today.
Right. Recently,
so that was all a committee
request. Recently, we put in a request to get some information, through the ECDEV group. We were talking about that, and staff couldn't find it. They couldn't locate it. They said that they'd lost that information. So that's just my only concern right now, is I would just, do we have all those records?
I think it depends on which one, because there was also an informal group called the Development Association of Souk that was formed a number of years ago. That was its own group that that was happening. So that's, I don't know if that group still exists or not.
Did staff work with that group?
Well, it wasn't a council committee, so there is no records. They just periodically would come and advocate on something that was important, and those changes did lead into OCP amendments. And then there was, I'm trying to think of what, I don't know exactly what, if it was a council committee, then we would have minutes. And it was either at the time a staff member that took the minutes or the chair of the committee that took the minutes. And sometimes they took them and sometimes they didn't. So if they didn't take the minutes, then we may or may not have anything.
Yeah.
And then in terms of outside groups, I don't know exactly which group. The only one that comes to mind is the Land Use and Development Committee that existed up until the end of 2014. And then there was some other sort of, not like lunch and learns, but informal gatherings where some members of council had meetings here with members from the development community, but they didn't want them to be official committees. So unless that councillor put forward something to council via notice of motion or otherwise, then there may not be a record of it.
No, this group had a staff member, but Councillor Bateman will definitely have a better memory than I do. I just want to make sure that that sentiment is captured and that it's shown in the work beforehand that what they've said has been retained.
Okay, well, we do have a I do have a speaking order. So Councillor Bateman, if you can just hold that till we get to your turn, or it's going to throw off this listing. Councillor St. Pierre?
I'd like to echo Councillor Logan's comments. I really appreciate investing in the future in this way. I also think that we need to look in a climate crisis situation at the third bullet. And honestly, given that a lot of our issues are going to be easier to deal with in a comprehensive way, dealing with social needs and dealing with food security and so on and so forth also makes sense to consider in terms of the OCP. So one of the things I do note is that, as Mr. McInnes commented, the document can be a little bit unwieldy if we go in too many different directions. So I think that coming together and bringing these themes together is going to be a very important task. I do think that the literature review that's been placed in this thing covers everything from the sustainability plan to the ag plan. I have no doubts that Councillor McMath's concerns will be dealt with by looking at all that literature, because it's pretty exhaustive. What I would like to see, however, is some work done with the community in terms of helping them deal with the quarantine and being able to input. Right now we're doing Zooming. I would love to have a little catchphrase that would look something like Souk's OCP is zooming along. We could do some capacity building that's already within the RFP, but if we actually work that way to help our community groups that already exist become familiar with the technology and input in that way, we can help them and we can help ourselves at the same time. So I would like to see some work done in that direction. That's about all I've got to say.
Okay, Councillor Bateman.
Oh, okay, unmuted. Back to Megan's, Councillor McMath's comment. I think she's referring to the Building and Development Committee that Councillor Berger chaired in 2018. And of course, their recommendations are a key part of the new building code that is moving forward. So we do listen, I think. Council traditionally has, and staff. I would agree with her also that we've really got to build a foundation on what's being created to date. And there was a very extensive, as I'm sure Mr. Palau is aware, extensive community consultation in 2016-17. And we came up with 3 big goals, or the planning department of the day, 3 big goals and 12 key directions. Those I feel should, to not lose or waste that contribution, that should be a foundational document. And there's a beautiful infographic that captures it. Top priority, protect the environment, celebrate community, build our economy, and use that as a starting point. To Councillor Lajeunesse point about the $200,000 budget, indeed, it might be possible to get the needs that you, Mr. Paolo and Mr. McInnes speak of, the writing, the presentation, the packaging, and the consultation at a price less than $200,000. I see that Sydney's OCP, which is just beginning its process, is budgeted at $125,000. So there is a range, and I think staff told us it was 100 to 300 approximately. So we're coming in at so yes, everything is fluid, obviously, and it is possible, though, I think, to save some money in these challenging times. A couple other points. No, really, yeah, two more. Under 3.5 in your RFP, there is the Proposal Review Committee. And I note that there is no counselor on that committee, no council representation, or the mayor for that matter, I don't believe. And the question would be, can one of our elected representatives be on that committee to help make that decision, or is that just not a normal protocol? Councillor CAO McInnes, maybe you can answer that.
Mr. McInnes?
I don't think that that's a prohibition. I'm reading 3.5, and it suggests that the District of Souk, and may include staff and contractors of the District of Souk. So I don't see a prohibition in there for a council member being part of the review committee, but that proposal will come to council as a whole before the contract is awarded.
Okay.
Does that answer that for you, Councillor Bateman?
Yeah,
Okay.
just that there might be an option for one of us to participate and help shape this thing. The other thing, I do note that in the RFP, there is a direct reference to the OCP Advisory Committee. And I think, I'm not sure council as a whole has I've advocated that we need this kind of advisory committee. I'm not sure council as a whole has determined that, or whether we do have some leeway one way or the other.
Mr. McInnes?
Absolutely. The suggestion as an advisory committee is required, and I'll harken back to Mr. Paolo's comments around building community capacity and making sure there's a good balance between technical expertise that goes into this document and local knowledge. And that was something I heard from this council early on, is that we need to start building community capacity and using some of the assets that we have in our community. We could go as far as to suggest that maybe we could do some of that engagement and writing if the appropriate person or group from our community bid. We could work with a major consultancy firm to sub out some of that work. So I think that the whole advisory committee piece, to me, is really important, because it is the foundation to build some capacity, as the document says. Make sure that we build some capacity both internally and in our community to continuously improve and implement. I think that in local government, we're really, really good at writing reports, but we kind of suck at implementation, and we got to get better at that.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else, Councillor Bateman?
No, that's great.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, first of all, I'm just very, very happy that we started this process. Been waiting a long time, and I'm very pleased to hear that we have some very experienced people on staff, and that goes to Councillor Lajeunesse's comment. We do have some in-house people that probably could do a lot of the work, but unfortunately, I think they're needed in the day-to-day operation of our community. So I'm all in favor of a consultant. I hate spending $200,000, and I would hope that in the negotiation that would be the high end of what we're going to pay. Hopefully, we can get it down less than that. It's 10 years since our last one, and counting. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm pleased to hear that we're going to review the must-be's and maybes. That's very, very important. I am a little concerned about when we start relying on some of these groups to do things. Is we got to be very careful with self-interest groups. There is a number of groups in town that have sort of their own agendas, like a broader picture, and that's where the consultant comes in. But overall, I'm very pleased. One is that we're getting on with it, and B, that the council is engaged with getting this done, and staff very much so. So I'm pretty happy with it so far.
Okay, thank you everyone for your comments. So what I understand from this is that this is out. It closes in May. We'll get an update. We've learned that the library has had to make extensions, and so that may be a factor depending on what we want the best bid, obviously. So we'll just leave it for staff to advise us on whether or not an extension will be needed or not, and that there'll be more discussions to come with council in terms of the criteria, what we need, what we may need. I'm a bit concerned with creating one document for everything. That was an objective back in 2008. It took 4 years for that council, for that document to be approved in 2010. It started in 2006. So it took 4 years because it was trying to be something for everyone. And then, as we know, it's been amended several times. And then as we've progressed and built a library of other documents, then we run into this collides with the OCP, that collides with the OCP, this collides with the OCP. And that creates, it doesn't provide consistency to anyone. It's the same example we hear of, well, drive-throughs are prohibited in the OCP. Well, maybe it did, but it doesn't anymore. The language has evolved many times. So when everyone counts on one document to be everything to everyone, it's just impossible. For me, I kind of like having an OCP that focuses on only what it needs to have, and that we have other policy documents that it refers to that can be quickly updated, and not a whole OCP. So we do have a climate action committee. It would be great to have. We already have a sustainability document that existed 10 years ago but wasn't followed through on. We have an accessibility plan that we didn't follow through on. We have an agricultural plan that we haven't adopted. But all of that, and this is where I think the community gets discouraged. We have a cultural plan, we have an arts plan, we have a community space plan, and this is where they get a bit, well, gee, we've done all this work into planning, and then that document is on a shelf somewhere and it's not being looked at. And we have a library of these plans that the community has invested in, and then we hear, oh, well, suites and duplexes, well, it's allowed in this and it's not allowed in that, and this transportation plan and it doesn't allow here. So it doesn't provide certainty to the development world, and it doesn't provide certainty to residents when it gets to be too unwieldy. So that is just a concern for myself. And then even as I looked in this list of current and background documents, we did extensive work in the town center design guidelines that was adopted in 2014, and that's not listed here, but that was something that everyone got excited about. It's what led to the Royal Bank being the beautiful structure that it is, versus the TD Bank being just a bland, just kind of a normal design, right? So I think you may just want to alter this a bit, that there may be other documents not listed here, because there are a lot of them, and that particular document took a year to create. It was vetted through the land use committee at the time, adopted by the council, extensive engagement from not just the development community, but the art community and the creative side of our community as well, and that document is missing. So there's just, I think that's where the consultant needs to build on the elements that we have, and then we have to consider, what do we do with everything else? So this is where, we have policies that are important to this council that weren't to other councillors, and future councils may seem and feel different. So I don't want to see, we just run the risk that the OCP will be amended over and over and over again, has been the case. Like, it was not even a year after that it was adopted that it was already starting to be amended. And Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. In terms of the advisory committee, though, this council will have the ability to make that selection. Is that correct, Mr. McInnes? Okay, because I would not be comfortable having a consultant determine who would be on the committee. I think that is something that this council really has to strategically think about and make that call on. So, other comments from members of council? Councillor St. Pierre?
I just wanted to mention that I did appreciate the language that was used in terms of emphasizing clear, consistent guidance, user-friendly, easily understood. I think the more we do that kind of work, the better the document will be, and the less we'll have trouble with amendments and misinterpretations and conflicts. I think one of the issues previously with the OCP was that it's just massive. And for example, its guiding principles look a lot more like our strategic plan. They're not really guiding principles on decision-making. They're granular. They get right down to the nitty-gritty. I think that if we can actually avoid those sorts of, honestly, basic mistakes, we'll have a much more usable document that can actually be more comprehensive but high level at the same time without causing these issues down the line. And that's what I'm hoping for, and I really appreciate that the RFP does seem to reflect that.
Good, thank you. Anything else from anyone? Okay, so we do have a recommendation here, and that is that council receive the report for information. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any comments or questions about the motion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Hearing nothing, that carries unanimously. Great, thank you very much, staff. Okay, 7.4 is the CRD bylaw 4328 RGS amendment referral for municipal acceptance. Over to staff, please.
Once again, Matthew, it's a planning agenda tonight.
That's all right. That's good for my first council meeting. So this report's relating to a response back to the CRD's referral regarding acceptance for the Capital Regional District's growth strategy bylaw amendment. And of course, that's referring to the update to their population projections, the dwelling unit amount, and employment projections. So what we're looking for is just council direction for staff to respond back based on the information that was provided, and everything in terms of what those projections and updated policy statement in the document look like are very acceptable, coinciding with the regional growth strategies update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So go back in order then, and then so I'll start with Councillor Loggins, please. Oh, sorry, did I miss? I did start with you, Councillor Lajeunesse, or no? No, I'm confused. I started with you the last time. Is that correct, Councillor Lajeunesse?
You did,
Okay.
yeah. But
Okay, sorry.
Okay, I have nothing to add, so.
Okay, well, I'm coming back to you because you're out of, that wasn't the order. So Councillor Loggins, please.
Out of order.
I know. I didn't make a tick mark.
Yeah, nothing to add here. I support the recommendation, and it's just crazy to look at the numbers. Thanks.
Yes. Councillor McMath? Nothing? Okay. Councillor St. Pierre?
Pass.
Councillor Bateman?
I'll resist the urge to make the motion.
Okay. Councillor Beddoes?
All fine with it.
And Councillor Lajeunesse?
I'm good.
Okay, so perhaps then Councillor, we have a recommendation that council direct staff to respond to the CRD referral dated March 13, 2020 with a letter of acceptance for bylaw number 4328, Capital Regional District Regional Growth Strategy bylaw number 1, 2018, amendment bylaw number 1, 2019. So perhaps Councillor Lajeunesse, would you like to move that? Okay, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, hearing none, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, number 7.5, COVID-19 relief measures.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is in front of council as information this evening. On March 31st of this year, we did, at a special meeting, we did approve the 2020 to 2024 5-year financial plan, which includes the 2020 budget, but there was a recommendation for administration to bring back a report on what we may do to talk about what relief we could bring to our ratepayers given the COVID crisis. So the intention of this report was really just to look at the legislative framework, give a little bit of background on where local government fits within the Canadian Constitution, and then specifically look at Division 10 of the Local Government Act, the Community Charter that deals with options for tax due dates. So in the Community Charter, there are 2 options. Each local government can have a standalone bylaw that sets the due date for property taxes. If a council does not draft and pass a bylaw, we refer to the default date of July 2nd. District of Sault, we do not have an alternate scheme bylaw, so our tax due date is July 2nd. We were to look at utilities for sewer as well, and our sewer tax until 2026 is set up as a parcel tax. So really, it's just another way. It gets added to the tax roll and is dealt with just as taxes are dealt with. The penalties on taxes are set by the regulation, and that penalty is 10%. And legislation does not allow local government to waive penalties. We can apply to the ministry and we can get concurrence from the minister to waive penalties, but we don't have the ability just to, or to write off penalties, but we don't have the ability ourselves to waive those penalties. So hopefully everything that we were looking for is in the report. There's not a whole lot that we can do at this point, other than we could bring forward a bylaw to change that July 2nd date. We could write and request from the minister the ability to write off taxes. But I really think all of that is premature at this point. I know that Municipal Affairs and Housing is working hard to come up with some strategies for all of local government in BC to deal with these issues that we're all hoping that we get some relief and are able to provide some relief to our taxpayers. I anticipate hearing some of that from Municipal Affairs and Housing, hopefully this week, but there is a Thursday conference call with the minister every week. And the conference call that the mayor and myself were on last week suggested hardly they're working very hard on this, and they had hoped to have some information for us last week past, but it's just not ready yet. Hoping to hear something on Thursday, and I'll open it up to questions.
And I'll just add to that that yes, these are all matters that have been raised with the minister. They're very aware of it, and I do expect we're going to hear something soon. So I'll go through for questions or comments, starting with Councillor McMath.
I'll pass for right now.
Okay, Councillor St. Pierre.
I'll pass as well.
Councillor Bateman.
Yes, yeah, clearly it's all a process here, and we're going to be getting direction, and we, along with all the other municipalities. I do note that some municipalities have taken steps already. Victoria, for example, has set its property tax due date at August 4th, and other communities have reduced their tax 2020 tax hike proposed. And I believe staff is combing through our 5-year budget, looking at 2020 capital costs and other expenses to see how we can reduce ours. Will that be a separate subject for discussion at a future meeting?
Yes, because we still need to adopt the tax rate bylaw. So our direction to staff has been, okay, you need to look, if we've adopted this budget, but now we do really need to look and consider amendments. So I expect that'll come back to us. And that also we will receive some direction from the province very soon. They're aware of that, the May 15th deadline is, it's like a month from tomorrow, and that they need to enable us to provide us time to then do what we need to do accordingly. So, yeah. Okay. Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I'm happy that staff is looking at it. Our CAO did mention a few items that could be put off for another year, and if that's possible, then I'm all for that. So we're waiting for staff to wade through the numbers again, and waiting for the province to give us some direction. So it's a hurry up and wait game. But I'm glad people are looking at it, and they're looking at it with great seriousness. So I'm okay.
Great. Councillor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, I think to pick a date other than July 4th at this point would be premature, given the fluidity of the situation. We can't really guess when the economy is going to get back into gear. So I think we should wait and see for a bit on that.
Okay, Councillor Loggins.
Thanks for the report. I believe there's no need to rush at this point either. We're not the only municipality going through this, so I'm sure we'll hear from the province with further information in due time.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? We have a recommendation here, and that is that council receive the report for information. We have a mover, moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Bateman. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, that carries unanimously. Okay, next item up, 7.6, is the 2020 community grant applications. So there's a long list, a big file that we've all received and have started looking at. So what I see here, maybe I'll turn it over to staff to introduce the report that they provided and just the direction that they're looking for from us today.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, given the current situation, as Council may recall, we did have a tentative meeting scheduled for March 31st, I believe it was, to hear all of the applications, which is in line with Council's community grant policy. But given that we cannot currently have public meetings, we're just seeking direction from Council if you would like us to proceed with any additional inquiries of the applicants and gather that information. We believe that we can accommodate the input from the applicants if that's Council's desire, simply by still having a Zoom meeting. Staff would be in the office and would contact each applicant at a designated time and have them participate via teleconference. We would not have them join the Zoom meeting, as that would be a violation of our privacy impact assessment that we've done on Zoom and the guidelines that we have set, because we lock out the participants once everybody is joined. So that would be a bit of a security risk for us to do that. But we can have everybody participate by phone if that's Council's desire. So we can either take Council's direction and go back to the applicants and ask them if they have any additional information, or if they're still wanting to proceed, we can provide that information, or we can simply have all of the applicants participate should they wish to through a teleconference meeting. That's all I have to add.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Machada. So first person on our speaking list here is Councillor St. Pierre.
I think I would appreciate the first option of going back to the applicants to get more information. I do think that, for example, Transition Souk has withdrawn their application for the Earth Day, but I know that they're planning internally to take some of that money and put it towards community gardens and helping out with other projects. I do think that it might be appropriate for us to consider basically COVID relief community efforts that might benefit from the community grants process. And I know the application period has closed, but that might be a good way of potentially helping our community through this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I like I agree with Councillor St. Pierre, and I'm looking forward to discussing the Sukfuchi application at the next council meeting. I feel that given how complicated it would be to go back out and organize these teleconferences, and I think we should waive Section 5A of the policy and review applications as submitted. These are solid documents. We know that they've come in 3 times as much money as we have is being requested. So I think we internally can make some calls about this in these difficult times and move things along.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes?
There, my big
There you
thumb
go.
again. Sorry. Yeah, I have a few things to say about it. I think we need to deal with them, but I like Councillor Bateman's idea is how much of the public input do we need? I mean, they have given us some pretty comprehensive information in their applications. I would think it best if we vet them, and if we need any information from the applicant, that is when we call them up. But I've gone through them all, and I've had my recommendations and thoughts on it. I'd like us just to get on with it and, you know, as a group, vet them and make a recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I just wonder how many of these things are actually going to be accomplished this year, given the current situation. We don't really know. So, yeah, I think if we can prioritize them and sort out the ones that are maybe not going to go this year and put them off until next year.
Councillor Loggins?
Yeah, I'm in favor of deferring this to another time. I don't think a lot of these applications are prepared for the situation we're currently in. They certainly weren't written with this in mind. So a lot of programs have the potential to change for the better, and a lot of programs may not happen at all. So I think it's not in our best interest to discuss them today, since we don't know if it's even possible for some of them to occur. At very least, I would like this sent back to staff to connect with people and see if their applications would still be valid for this. Because right now, looking at it, there's maybe 1 or 2 that I would support moving forward in the current situation. Having said that, I do like Councillor St. Pierre's idea of considering relief type applications. However, again, I don't see too many listed in this document here. It's not to say at all that any of these applications are not worthy for our community and important for our social needs. However, I think those needs have changed dramatically, and I don't really want to support putting funding towards things that may or may not occur based on our current situation, when we are faced with, you know, being pressured by the community to lower taxes even further, as many other municipalities are doing. So again, these are excellent applications. We would have to cut 3/4 of them anyhow. And I just don't see how relevant many of them are at this time.
No, so just to clarify, the intent was not to approve any tonight. It was just to here's how are we handling these. So
on that note, and I wouldn't even push this discussion to the next meeting or anything like that. I don't see it as an emergency. I don't think many of these are emergent that we would have to deal with in terms of the way we're handling meetings right now. So I'm not really in favor of creating a Zoom situation where we're able to vet these applications in the near future. I would prefer to give them all the time they deserve, and the public comments and questions they deserve. And every single time we have people present to council on their applications, we learn very important information about the applications that change our decisions one way or another. So when we're faced with a budget of $165,000 for these applications, or $153,000, I think it would be really important for us to obtain that information. And again, a lot of these just may not be relevant for this time.
Thank you. Councillor McMath?
Yeah, I echo Councillor Logan's. Either that, or if we give them the opportunity to rewrite post-COVID, basically. So obviously when they wrote these applications, they didn't know this was coming. So at least give them the opportunity to reapply and then push that date. And then that would give us maybe enough time to be coming to have those face-to-face meetings where we do get the presentation. And just like Councillor Logan said, there's so much more information that comes out in those that doesn't translate as well in their written application.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that's a bit unpopular. I'm struggling with the community grant program completely. This is 1% roughly in taxes. I find that it would be a bit unfair to put a COVID lens onto the applications, because while some of them may adapt, others didn't. So then we would almost need to create an entirely different grant program that is focused on COVID-19 relief and upswing, and how and open that up to everyone in the community, be like a complete restart to the program if we were going to vet it with a COVID lens. Our businesses are struggling, individuals and families are struggling. Everyone is in a big struggle right now. Many people are out of work. And so, you know, I agree with Councillor Logan. It's like when you look at, we always learn something new. I've changed my mind on applications, pre and post, you know, some I'll support that, and others I don't. Like it just varies. I think that presentation is important. I just find going, and some of these, you know, and many of them are event related, that how do you even have the capacity right now to plan it? So if we had staff go back and start calling everyone, I would almost be inclined that we would hear, okay, well, yeah, that project won't go, but this one will instead. So that's why it would be limiting only to the people that have applied. And there may be other ones, like we already have one that's come in now after the deadline, which automatically would be disqualified, but it's here, it's a notice of motion. So if we were going to deal with a grant program, it would have to be in the current reality, which means they would need to start over again. However, when we're looking at, these are all, you know, they're all a number of excellent projects that I think may or may not fit when a new reality settles in to our community. Some of them list event dates that are known and some are unknown, but even the Souk Fine Art Show is an late July, August event and is now taking on a virtual form, because at some point they need to just plan it. The show has to go on, and it has to go on in some way. So I just, I'm struggling with, I think this, for me personally, this year, we don't have a community grant program because we need to find savings for our constituents and for our community right now. I think these are all valid, and even with line item fundings, we're going to, and this is the difficult part when you look at, well, what is council's role in this? Your role now is going to be making difficult decisions in the reality that we are all living. That's going to be the challenge. You'll have to say yes to some things and no to some things, and that's going to be the challenge. I don't see any funding coming to us to keep things as they are, that there will be some form of provincial or federal bailout. I don't see that happening. I see us that we are going to have to focus on what is essential to our community to get through this. And I think our community will expect us to make those decisions. So when it comes to what is essential, this is keeping the wastewater running, it's keeping our roads maintained, it's keeping our parks healthy. It's getting on with this great time to do road work because nobody's driving, and planning for the future like the OCP. But in terms of discretionary spending, which this is, and some of our line item pieces are, it's just a challenge. And I just think that if we want to put a COVID lens on it, then we form a whole different grant program based on that. But again, it's a bit early because we're hearing that many of the restrictions are going to last until there's a vaccine. I don't know when that is. I think at some point the economy needs to get moving again. But I don't think all the restrictions are going to be lifted at once. Now, this is just me. I don't have a time machine. I haven't heard this from anyone. It's just what I'm sensing. You know, how can you just open it all up and it's life is normal? Sadly, I feel that some of our businesses may not make it through this. And I don't think some families will survive, will make it through this. I mean, they'll survive, but you know, just with the debt that they're accumulating, the challenges in their family. And so some of these, you know, do they even have volunteer capacity to deliver if their volunteers are hurting right now? So it's just like, that's just the tough nature of where we're at. I don't know how long this is going to last, but over time, we're going to have to examine how our municipal operations fare. And I know I've talked to our CAO about this a lot because it is something that keeps me up at night. Like, how do we keep things running when the revenue isn't there? So right now, a concern that I have and many local officials have is our residents and our businesses' ability to pay taxes. So we're looking at relief measures. We know that there's deferment options, but that's kicking the can down the road. You will still have to pay your taxes at some point. And if you have equity, you can qualify. If you don't have equity, you're not going to be able to pay your taxes. So then we're looking for, okay, no penalty on those folks that are struggling. So how then do you stick them a tax bill that says, oh, by the way, we have this wonderful grant program. Now you can argue it's a good stimulus to get things rolling, but I think that's where we would need to create a different program that would look at that. This isn't the right fit now because these were all designed in a different time, a different mindset. So I just think, you know, for myself, I just think this is a decision that needs to be made next year. Maybe when things are better, we can increase the funding. You know, it's not just 65,000. When we see how our businesses and our residents fare, when we start to climb out of this, when we see what stimulus grant programs are available or what we can do, that maybe we have the ability to increase what it is. But some of these projects, yes, they're necessary capital infrastructure for some, but they're closed. They're not going to be used. So maybe it just needs to wait. And then we know, I am hearing that there's going to be stimulus funding available. So there may be other avenues. I just struggle that this is taxpayer dollars and our community and our residents are in a bit of a crisis with it. So I'll go back through the speaking order. I'll go with try to do this one with a show of hands because maybe not everyone. We'll see how that goes. But Councillor Beddoes, I see you there.
Yeah, I just interesting concept, and I hear you saying that just maybe we don't do community grants this year. I think that's what you were saying in all of that.
Yeah, not very clearly, apparently.
Well, no, it was clear enough. It did go on a long time, but that's okay. No, I was just kidding you with that. That might be the best way to go. I mean, I looked through at great length at their applications, and believe me, most of them were no for me, especially in these times. I guess if we just said no to all of them, and then if allow an appeal of some people that it is crucial to them, I didn't see anything there. You know, Amber Academy, I mean, they're not going to go under because they're not doing anything anymore. But that might be the best approach, is just say this year. And I know there's a lot of taxpayers out there would love that. Some of them just hate this community grant thing. And I'd be inclined to look at that proposal that we, in fact, do not consider it this year and have some sort of an appeal process. There might be 2 or 3 of those applications that is absolutely crucial to them. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at them again. But it'd be pretty agonizing. We go through all those, and there's 600 pages of this stuff, and it's brutal to go through. It might be the best approach. I kind of like the idea. That's my 2 bits.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Beddoes. Other councillors have any additional? Okay, Councillor, I'm going to go back up in order. Councillor Bateman, then St. Pierre.
Okay, well, you've changed my mind completely. I quite like this idea of looking at this community grant in a post-COVID or COVID response fashion. I think Ms. Musata was working towards a September 1st deadline under this new policy. So perhaps we could shelve it for now and see where we are in August, or just shelve it for the year. But that's my thought.
Okay, Councillor St. Pierre.
I really like the idea of actually coming up with the COVID type of grant funding process. I think that right now, you're absolutely right. We're going to have a lot of people that are going to be in rough shape. And I think that actually providing resources to our community groups so they can actually help those people that are having a hard time makes sense. And is a better way of leveraging our tax dollars than potentially having a small reduction that people still aren't going to be able to afford anyway. If they don't have the money to pay their property taxes, $70 is not going to make a big difference to them, but it might make a huge difference with some community groups helping out our families. So I happen to think that's money well spent, but not necessarily in the format we have right now. And I would be in favor of potentially scrapping everything we have right now, while maybe still having a look at, for example, the crisis intervention centers and so on and so forth, and those things that might potentially have been line items because they actually provide specific service in the community that might help in this time. But that would be my thought.
Councillor Loggins.
So the crisis centers and like the Soup Food Bank and the Soup Family Research Society, they're receiving funding from other organizations. So the Victoria Foundation, for example, previously raised $1 million in the past month, and they're on track for another $2 or $3 million for the Rapid Relief Fund, which is just for like local organizations within the Greater Victoria area. So the Soup Food Bank received 40,000 of that, and I believe hopefully they'll still remain in our as one of our line items. And the Soup Family Research Society received 10,000 of that, and they're going to be putting it towards a Good Food Box, food vouchers, Western food vouchers, and some delivery services for vulnerable clients, especially isolated seniors. So there is funding coming from other sources that are not tax dollars to our local community organizations that need it, most of who have demonstrated fiscal responsibility through the years to organizations such as United Way and the Victoria Foundation. I would prefer we go that route and just encourage people, if they are able to donate through those avenues, is that money will come back to our community. I would prefer to take this out of the budget and not worry about a fall deadline this year, but to put the grant program on hold and revisit it next year if possible.
Thank you, Councillor Loggins, for raising the Rapid Relief Fund. I have submitted a letter. I was asked early on to provide something. It's never hit print. It was beautifully written. Councillor Bateman basically wrote it. It was lovely. It just hasn't come to print yet, but it does highlight how early on we do have the Soup Shelter Society also receive funding, and there's more coming. So yeah, I appreciate you raising that, and maybe one day you'll actually see the letter that we sent.
There is one thing I wanted to add as well, just in terms of if we were to revamp the grant program altogether. Having been in the position of executive director for 6 years, I know that when money is potentially available, you'll apply for it whenever you can. So in situations like this, if we're going to be spending all of the time and energy when we could be spending it on other things, towards recreating an entirely new grant program, I don't think that's in our best interest, because what we might end up seeing is a lot of organizations just applying to this because they can, and they may not have the resources or in terms of finances, like for instance, our grant program requires organizations to have other support from other organizations, not just the District of Soup. Sorry, I should talk slower. I've had so much coffee today. It's unbelievable. Anyway, I can't imagine this grant program working slowly enough for people to garner support from the required organizations for that, and also create the positions that are needed. And because we don't fund people, right? So who's going to be doing this work? But there are a lot of questions around that, and in times of desperation, it's never really people don't really make the best decisions. So I don't know how how well a grant program would go if it's just a last minute COVID relief funding program, which is why, again, the Victoria Foundation and United Way, they have that locked down. They know who their people are and they're sending money out to those locations. So I would just scrap it for the year.
Thank you, Councillor. And done very well with the United Way. In fact, the District of Souk won the Spirit Award last year through the efforts of our staff. And so, very well stated. Other comments from members of council? Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I would be in favor of scrapping the community grants this year as well. Just given the uncertainty of the times, and I don't think we should be taking any more money from people than we need to.
Don't take any more money from people? Well,
No,
okay.
No, don't take any extra money out of people's pockets at this time.
Yeah, no, this really is a time where our residents and businesses are dealing with what they need and not with what they want. And for those that can do both, then that's great. But there's not that many people out there in that position. Okay, so I'm hearing that that there could be a resolution supported that, just thinking of some good language, that council directs staff to notify the applicants that the 2020 community grant program has been canceled.
Well, it's on hold.
Suspended for this year.
Not canceled. We don't want to cancel it forever.
Well, for the 2020 grant program.
Yeah.
Yeah, just say it's suspended for 2020. No?
I don't know, cancel. I'll go to Ms. Mushada. Like, to me, it's like 2020. What do you think about what I just said?
I would just suggest that the actual motion be that council postpone the 2020 community grant program and direct staff to notify applicants. So there's actually a directive of council to postpone the program for 2020.
Okay, so meaning postpone till 2021? Is that what postponing means?
If that's your desire, yes.
Yeah, I don't want it in this year's budget.
Yeah, like what I'm also hearing is that we don't want to put the funding into the budget. So this would be, the direction would be that the applications are notified and the money comes out of the budget. Councillor McMath?
Can the motion be that it's removed from the 2020 budget and to notify applicants? Just needs like stronger language. Like when you say postpone, it sounds like they still have an opportunity.
Yeah, that's what because when I hear postponing, I'm like, to the next meeting, like it's just going to come back. And
So
I
the
just...
motion, yeah, the motion is that we remove the community grants from the 2020 budget.
That was going to be my suggestion. So the motion that I have is that council postpone the 2020 community grant program to 2021. Council directs staff to notify applicants that the program has been postponed to 2021 and direct staff to remove the community grant budget from the 2020 to 2024 budget or 2020 budget.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, so Councillor Beddoes, are you prepared to move that?
I'm prepared to move that if Carolyn can restate it, but I think that hits a nail in the head. I think that's what we all said we wanted, so I'm okay with that wording.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Loggins is seconded. Okay, anything to add, Councillor Loggins? Does the motion are you okay with that now? Okay. And Councillor McMath, does that work for you?
I just have trouble with the language postpone.
Yeah, so in this case, it has a date. Sorry, we can only speak one. It has a date to 2021.
Prefer any better?
No, sorry. It just sounds like that money is going to be saved for a later time, just with that verbiage.
Mr. McInnes, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Sorry, can you go ahead, please?
I just want to make sure that in the policy, starting at section 2 subsection C. This also deals with the line item budget item. So I just want clarification that we're saying no to all the applications that came in the line item.
Okay, so in that case, I think we need a, okay, so I almost want, okay, now I can't think of what I'm trying to say here. The line items need to come back to us in a different report, because that part, I missed that part. I was only focused on the applications, and I know that there has been some questions from council about the status of some of the line items. And so this is where I think that needs to be a subsequent motion where we direct staff to come back to us with that. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I'm all in favor of just the community grant applications, these 60, whatever we had.
Yeah.
But the line items, I think we have to take a closer look at. I'd like to keep those in the budget for now until we can have a little harder look at them, because some of that is crucial funding. So I'm not prepared to move on that. I think that needs more scrutiny. But the grant applications that we've just dealt with, I think those can be canned. And I don't care what language you use, deferral or cancel. The fact is, it's out of the budget for this year, and we're going to re-examine it next year. So I was okay with the wording.
Okay. Ms. Machado?
I've got a little bit different wording here, that council eliminate the 2021 community grant program for reconsideration in 2021. I think that indicates that there's no intent to carry over that funding. And then they still have the notify applicants and direct staff to remove from the budget.
Okay, no, I'm comfortable with that. Is the mover and seconder comfortable with that language?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, Councillor Loggins is the seconder, is good. Okay, Councillor St. Pierre?
I feel like we're moving very, very quickly on this, and I understand austerity and understand people are scared, but I think we're moving very quickly this with not a lot of consideration, and we haven't had a chance to go back to any of the community groups that might be dealing with things that we do need. So I'm a little concerned about this, and I don't think I can support moving this quickly while eliminating all possibility of actually providing money to people who may need it.
Okay, Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I was wondering whether a small portion of the community grant fund could be moved to council contingency, so we would have a little bit of leeway. For example, I'm looking at our long list here. The Need to Suicide Prevention and Education group have requested $1,700, for example, and that's the sort of thing that council contingency potentially could fork over.
So one idea then is that when staff comes back to us with a report on amendments we can make to the budget, I mean, obviously we could examine contingency at that time, and even like our travel expense for both council and staff will have dramatically already been reduced. So those are some things that I think I don't want to start toying with one element. Like, we would need to see all the pieces together. Yeah, Ms. Gray.
Yeah, I was just going to echo the same thing, that when the report comes back with potential amendments, we can kind of, I'll make sure to kind of cover all these pieces and kind of pro and con, if we remove this all together, if we leave a little bit extra in council contingency, because there's other options to potentially fund certain organizations if they have a project that desperately needs funding in 2020 that is a priority for council. We can figure out ways to potentially fund that through council contingency, as Mr. Bateman stated. As well, yeah, with the line items, like, that's a complicated conversation a little bit too, because I'm not 100% like, I'd have to we need to review what all of these programs normally do with this money. Like, for example, Canada Day, if Canada Day is not going to look like it normally does, do they still need the same level of funding? or what is that going to look like? And that's just the biggest ticket one, but there's all these other $7,000 light items that I think we need to kind of confirm, like, what do you normally do with these funds every year, and is this program and event still going to happen, and if not, do we defer that, or how would that look in combination? Because as Councillor Logans has stated before, we're very generous with what we give out in grants and light items. So now is a good time to kind of definitely reprioritize and keep a bucket of money, whether that's in community grants or just bump up contingency a little bit for 2020, and then we can kind of re-examine everything as we need to.
Okay, so right now with this particular, I'll draw council back to the motion that's in front of us. So this is dealing with the community grants right now, but I do want to put forward another motion for you to consider about the line items. So is there anything further on the motion? Sorry, Councillor St. Pierre, it's a bit dry in here. Can you go ahead?
At this point, I'm just looking for a clarification. So if we move the resolution as stated, there would still be the opportunity to top up contingency so that if something comes up, we can have something available?
I think that'll be a decision that we'll need to make when we receive that staff report back to us.
The motion that we have right now doesn't include a request from staff for a report. So are we getting that report regardless?
No, that's a different report that we made at our last meeting when we adopted the budget, is we asked staff to come back to us.
Okay, that one.
So that report is in the works right now. And this is just right now is dealing specific to the community grant program. So until we receive that report, I think we should just hold off on discussing where and what. There may be an appetite on council to cut contingency completely. I don't know, right? Because that is not the report that's in front of us right now. This is about the community grant program specifically in these applications.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, my understanding is staff is taking that discussion into consideration, and along with their other recommendations, that they do have a contingency. So if something does come up that I think Councillor St. Pierre may be concerned about, is that we do have the ability to react to it, but it'll have to be on an as-is basis once we go through all these other programs. Because it is a different time. But I think your concerns are going to be addressed, and I think we have to leave it up to staff to do their work. And it sounds like they're diligently laying it out for us, and then we can make that recommendation. But the first order of business is to get that community grant applications done with, and the sooner we get that out to it, the people can adjust to it. So I think I'm very happy with the way it's going, as long as we've got a few bucks left in our contingency fund that we can help those. There might be 2 or 3 of those that would have to come to us and ask for some funding, and we should have something available when and if we need it. So I think that's going to be taken care of. I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Okay, does that sound good, Mr. McInnes and Ms. Machado? You have the direction with this resolution and this discussion? Okay, so I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor St. Pierre is opposed, so the motion carries. The next item matter that I would like council to consider is that it touches on what Mr. McInnes says, is that staff come back to us with a report that sort of summarizes the line items, and this will require staff to sort of check in with the line item recipients to determine, I'm hoping that everyone recognizes the reality. If we say, it's how you ask the question, do you require this funding? They'll say yes. In some cases, some have the service agreements that spells out what the funding is, and so we would need to look at how the district is, that we honor our side of that agreement. Arguably, not every group with a service agreement has honored their side as well. So we need to understand where the funding is going and what its purpose is this year. And then in terms of other line items, it's just a question like, okay, you've received this amount of funding. Can you share now how this money will be spent this year, given the COVID-19 crisis that's happening? Some of it will be very straightforward, right? I know that the food bank is putting together a lot of hampers. It's just there's a list there. So I just think it would be timely to examine that as the second part to this. Councillor McMath?
I just wanted to clarify, we're just going to review and reconnect with those service agreements. We're not going to trim immediately if they haven't been fulfilling their service agreement.
Well, we need to look at what they're planning to do with the funding, and then I think that'll be a decision when we get into the budget conversation is what we're funding and we're not. I don't know.
No, yeah, I'm with you there. More just because I would say like out of 6 service agreements, like 1 has like maintained its paperwork. And so I just want to make sure we're like doing a review and a reconnect. We're not just immediately purging based off that technicality.
I guess that'll be a decision that we'll have to make at the coming meeting.
Okay.
So in terms of direction to staff, do you require a resolution for this?
It would be a good idea, but if I could just step back for one moment, the service agreements are different than the line items, and the service agreements are a contract.
Right.
So those aren't really something that we can just change.
No, and I appreciate that. That's where I meant that we have an obligation to provide, but the other side of it also has an obligation on what they need to provide, and that's the accountability piece that is missing. So I think it's timely that we have that conversation, because the argument in this time is, why are you doling out money to this organization that is not performing or delivering and hasn't provided anything to consider? Like, that's a tough question to answer and say, well, because we have a service agreement. Well, there's their side of the equation, and I guess there's a long, complicated history as to why and why not. But when it comes to who we are accountable to, which is our constituents, this is an expectation that we have to take on. So I wouldn't say, if the group is performing, then to say, oh, we're going to cut your funding, when we do have a contract that we need to honor in place. Yes, I totally get that. But in terms of some of the others, some of them are very proud of the work that they've done. And I think just even for council to see one of their reports would be good, so that we know that that work is happening. It was a surprise to me to learn that many have failed to produce anything in years. And I know that we've had that in our budget conversations. Councillor Logans?
I just want to make note that this is particular, I know it relates, but specifically this is not on the agenda. And I think making a motion to bring it forward is a very good idea, but I'd like to save that discussion for bringing it forward and focus on how we want the information to come to us.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where just the way it's lumped into our community grant is how it got raised. So this is where it's like, okay, it's timely for us to look at this, because otherwise, yeah, all the line items would have had their funding cut, and that wasn't, I don't feel, the intent at this time. It was only the community grants. I thought I saw another hand. Okay, Councillor McMath, go ahead. Sometimes the squares move around, so it's weird.
It's a different format. I thought we had made a motion or a directive already. Maybe I misunderstood, about a review of the community service agreements.
Actually, I think you're right. So is that not already in the works?
So the new policy, C0003, the responsibility for that policy falls under the Director of Finance. So my expectation is that the Director of Finance fulfills that requirement for the reporting on the service agreements as well.
So then you don't need a resolution, or you do?
No.
Like, if it's already being worked on, we don't need to make a resolution on this item.
No, so the grant applications, they will be contacted, and they'll be pulled from the 20 budget. The line items and the agreements will come back to council as part of the budget amendment package.
Okay.
And when is that?
Well, right now we're just waiting. Right now, the tax rate bylaw, the deadline to have your tax rate bylaw adopted is May 15th. There is some suggestion that that is going to be pushed back as a number of other requirements are going to be pushed back. So my understanding from council is that the amendments need to be approved before the tax rate bylaw is adopted. So we're working with that May 15th date right now, but a lot of things still are sort of in flux. And if that date gets pushed back, then we will probably use that space to continue to consider what we want and what we don't want in the 2020 budget.
But either way, like if it's pushed back, it still won't be pushed back that long. So we would receive this report in like within a month.
Yeah, just there's a bunch of stuff going on. It's germane to the discussion we had earlier about waiting for the province to give us some direction on deadlines and dates. And I think if that clarity does not come from the provincial government within the next couple of weeks, we need to start moving on our own. Meaning we need to, if we want to move that July 2nd tax date, we probably should draft a bylaw and bring it before council. But my hope is that we get that clarity from the province within the next week or two.
Okay, Ms. Gray?
And also just to add to what Mr. McInnes is saying, like there's also deadlines for sending the tax notices to Queen's Printer with the due dates on them and stuff. So definitely before, and that's like, early May, I believe. I'll double check with Stacy tomorrow, but yeah, I believe it's the first week of May. We kind of need to give Queen's Printer the, okay, here's our package that needs to go, and as well as the inserts and all that. So I anticipate kind of discussing with Mr. McInnes later on this week, just kind of some potential budget ideas. And then hopefully, as he stated, in the next couple of weeks, have a report coming back to council just with some recommendations and some options to looking at the budget if we've got no direction. Because right now, we just got the CRD requisition and there's no change to their date. So any change to our property tax date doesn't necessarily change what we owe to CRD and when we owe it. So then we get into cash flow considerations. So all that will kind of be encompassed in the report that'll come before you in definitely within the next month, but hopefully within a couple of weeks here.
Okay. So in terms of getting back to our conversation about the line items that are in the budget, the staff have the direction they need from council in terms of that's going to come to us in the budget amendment report, correct?
Yes, if I could, Your Worship, I would love the corporate officer to read the resolution from the grant applications. I just want to make sure that it's going to capture what I need to continue to steward this.
The previous motion that I had was to that council eliminate the 2020 community grant program for reconsideration in 2021, direct staff to notify applicants of the program elimination, and to direct staff to remove the community grant funding from the 2020 budget. That was moved and seconded and approved, and then I was going to suggest a second motion that council direct staff to bring back a report on line item community grants and community agreements after reviewing funding use with the organizations, if that's appropriate.
So that first resolution was carried by council. The second one has not been tabled yet. Is that correct?
Not yet been moved. That was just something I was crafting for council consideration.
Yeah, this is the first we heard it because I wasn't entirely sure that we needed a motion because I thought and that's where I kept pressing. So it sounds like our corporate officer has put something together that we should consider. So is that okay? Because we're like, do you need one or not? And,
Yes.
okay, we do. Okay, Ms. Machado, please read it out one more time.
Yes, that council directs staff to bring back a report on community grant line items and community agreements after reviewing funding use with the organization.
Okay. Good. Is that okay? Councillor McMath.
I just wonder if we should have a conversation about staff's conversation with these community groups. Because like you said, if we say, hey, like, what do you really, really need? They're gonna say, you know, everything, you know. I just wonder if we should have some more structure before they start having those conversations.
I think the structure is that given the situation, staff is reaching out to you because we're looking to refine our budget and council needs some clarity in terms of where the funding is going to go this year. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose it forever, but it's just where's it going and why. We need to answer. If we approve them all, which is fine, we have the ability to do that. We also then have to answer to the community. It's like, you gave X amount to who and why? Well, I don't know, because it was a line item. Like in this crisis where people are scraping by, we need a bit more clarity. So even if there's something in a report that comes down, you know, it's X for X, okay, we're comfortable supporting that. And then it's enough. Or, you know, they're doing this show or that event. It may be virtual or otherwise, but they're still going to have operational expenses. And so this is, I don't want to scare anyone. These are all valuable, but I think in this time there is going to be some expectation from the community that we're really vetting this and taking this seriously, given the struggle that's out there.
Yeah, just to be the devil's advocate here. So you're basically asking them for a post-COVID update, right? Which is what we said we wouldn't do with the community grant application.
Not a post-COVID one, it's just you're getting X amount of dollars, where's it going?
Right, which will change now, right?
Depends on the groups. Some of them will continue and it's providing a valuable service as it always has for years. But some of them, I have no idea where the money's going because we haven't received any report on anything. So it's hard to justify supporting them when I don't even know where they're going. I haven't seen anything in years.
So part of that,
there's no agreement, there's nothing. So what is it there for?
So part of that, like, that falls on us for not upholding those regulations and like those expectations. Like, they've never been penalized for that. And so I just don't want to set us up for a situation where if we disagree with what they think is a legitimate use of funds, that we renege those through a technicality.
Fair enough. If they're providing a good service, it should stand. Councillor Loggins, then Councillor Beddoes, then Councillor St. Pierre.
Are you looking for movement of this motion?
Yes.
I'll move the motion.
Okay, is there a seconder?
If there's a seconder.
Seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. So go ahead if you'd like to speak to it, Councillor Loggins.
Again, we don't have to get too in depth with it now, but just a quick example is the All Souk Day event, or sorry, Canada Day event, where they're going to bring in the lumberjacks for an extra $10,000. That's one thing that we can probably remove. So I think it's just the due diligence of going through those files.
Right, Councillor St. Pierre as the seconder.
I agree. It's just a matter of going through the different items and getting information back. So this is a report to get more information back so we can make a proper decision, and let's just get on with it.
Yep, Councillor Beddoes. You're muted, Councillor Beddoes.
Sorry, there you go. I don't have any problem asking for justification. I mean, this is the public's money and we're the stewards of it. So if somebody gets their nose out of joint because we're asking for some justification, and we not demanded it in the past, we're demanding it now. And I think with what's going on and the budget the way it is, I think it's the right thing to do, is that we go back to them and saying, okay, justify what you're going to use this money for. You can't just say we're going to need it. Give us a reason for it. And I think staff can make a report back saying just that. So I'm okay with it, justifying. So let's get on with it.
Any other comments from other councillors? Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor McMath, are you opposed? You're muted, sorry.
Just delayed, not opposed.
Okay, so everyone is in favor. Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you, everyone. That wasn't easy. Okay, 8.1 is we're in the bylaws section here. Let's just switch gears here. So that is the OCP amendment bylaw update to regional context statement. Over to staff, please.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Okay, so this is report is just respecting and a follow-up to the January 13th first reading for the amendment to the OCP regarding the regional context statement. So you heard earlier in today's meeting the update in the regional strategy. So this is just coinciding with the necessary update for the OCP to be in compliance, recognizing those updated projections for population, dwellings, etc., and just fixing the text a little bit more to also comply with that. So this is just following that January 13th first reading, and subject to receiving second reading, we will proceed with scheduling a public hearing only to the point where we get further clarification from the province as to how we can accomplish that. So we won't actually proceed with the scheduling of that until we have more clarity, but that would be the intent once second reading is given. And that concludes this report.
Okay, thank you. So I'm still puzzled by this, just like I was in January. Like, I don't get why we're doing this. I understand that the CRD has updated their, you know, like they have made changes. And so that is what prompted this. However, this is like bringing 2010 into the future, and we're just spending all this time on this. Like, can't we just say we're in the process? We've just launched a new OCP. Like, when I see this come up, you know, it's ancient now. It's a decade old. So when we're spending time and then to go to a public hearing on it, I think would be confusing. Like, why are we asking for, like, doing all this work on something that's old? Like, I just don't understand. Like, I just don't get it. Maybe it's just me, but I just don't get it when it's just so, like, it's just not relevant when we're embarking on a new plan. So why put any energy into that when we'll be then having to go forward with our newly worded revised context statement, and then would be asking for engagement and stakeholder and public input in a hearing and all that? Like, I just don't get it.
It's a lot of it comes down to a timing matter. So I could see there being you know, a valid point to going back to the region and saying, you know, we're going to be bringing forward an updated OCP in the next couple months and see if that would be acceptable to the CRD. But given that this will be a review process where we still haven't hired a consultant yet and gone through that full process, it's still going to be a number of months going into, you know, past 12 months at least for that project. There will be a significant amount of time where there will be a lack of compliance between the OCP and what the region has. So it would be necessary at this point to make that necessary compliance change and amend the OCP. But yes, I would agree with you that if we were coming forward with a new OCP in the next couple months, we could approach the region and ask for that leniency, but it will be a number of months going into the years before we do that full update and bring forward a new OCP.
Okay, well, can we keep it to a minimum? Like, even when I saw this at the CRD board and you see more updated modern language and then you get our live, work, play and blah, 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 it's like, I don't know. It's just so stale. Okay, other questions? Comments? Okay, so we have a recommendation here, and that is that council gives second reading to the official community plan amendment bylaw number 774 400-15-2020, and that a public hearing be scheduled for the official community plan amendment bylaw number 774 400-15-2020 in accordance with section 466 of the Local Government Act. We're going to have to be very clear to the public that this is why we are doing this come public hearing. because it'll get confusing.
Councillor Bateman had a comment.
Councillor Bateman had a comment.
Oh, thanks for seeing me there, Tony. Councillor St. Pierre. No, I just, it's a procedural matter. All 13 municipalities in the CRD have to do it. We're doing it. It's most of the work is being done. You will read out the requirements for a public hearing. Undoubtedly, there will be maybe 1 or 2 comments at most, and then we'll move forward about our day.
Yeah, hopefully.
So can I move this? That council do
Yes,
second reading?
I just read it out.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I just read it out. That's what I was
Yes.
looking at as I was reading it out. So Councillor Bateman is moving this. Is there a seconder? Moved by Councillor Loggins. Questions? We do the minimum amount necessary on this dated OCP. I don't talk about it anymore.
Live,
It'll come up
work, and
again
play.
though when it comes back to the public hearing. He'll be drone on about it again. Anyway, all those in favor? Opposed? Were you opposed, Councillor Lajeunesse? No. Okay, it's the delay. All those in favor, it's carried unanimously. And Mr. Powell, please tell the consultant that I never want to hear live, work, play. I just can't stand that. Okay, I'll shut up about it. Okay, under new business, we have 2 notice of motions. So these are here. The first one is for consideration at the April 27, 2020 regular council meeting that the District of Sioux contributes $1,660 from its community grant program to support Sioux Region Food Cheese Sioux Region Backyard Garden Project. In this instance, since the program is being canceled, would this applicant then be notified? I mean, it's not really an applicant because it hasn't been accepted. So I'm just wondering procedurally, perhaps Ms. Machada can answer about this one.
Yeah, I mean, normally we would not, like, the policy says that it will not be forwarded to council. So, but given that they have kind of taken a sidestep and it's been brought forward to a member of council, I would just suggest the member of council bringing this forward, contact them to let them know that council has eliminated the program this year.
Okay, so that's that. The second one is also for April 27th, whereas our food security is heavily affected by the present pandemic, and whereas council strategic plan includes food security as an objective, that the following recommendations from the Climate Action Committee's Food Security Working Group be adopted into the council strategic plan, and that food security be made a District of Sioux priority. Number 1, invite the Sauk Nation to the food security table. 2, review, adopt, and initiate the 2012 Sioux Agricultural Plan. 3, support the formation of a food policy council and the adoption of a food charter. 4, use OCP review to update a flood food systems plan. 5, initiate a feasibility study for a food hub. And 6, participate in a regional food strategy. And then the recommendations are attached. So it'll come to us at our next regular scheduled meeting. Item 10, council verbal reports. Do I have members? Okay, Councilor, I'm going to go in alphabetical order, starting with Councilor Beddoes because he had his hand up. So I'll circle back to you, Councilor Beddoes. Go ahead, Councilor Beddoes.
I just want to say today at Sea Park, we have given direction. The province is interested in taking over Sea Park as a homeless, I guess a shelter, I guess is the better way to put it, for foreseeable future, limiting it to 30 on the inside and 15 camping outside. They will be responsible for the security, they'll be responsible for over 9,000 setup, and they will pay us $400. What was it, a month, a week? I can't remember now. A day, $400 a day rental. Yeah, it was a gut-wrenching one to deal with, but it was unanimous that basically the province can do it regardless. So that's what's going to be happening down Sea Park in the next little while.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes, for that update. Councillor Bateman.
Okay, I've checked in with Vancouver Island Regional Library about the status of our new library, and a pre-qualification tender was posted on BC Bids in late February with a deadline of March 23rd. Now that deadline's being pushed forward a month because potential contractors had acknowledged that they were having trouble lining up the trades. So that's the end of next week. And then once that short list of contractors has been assembled, they'll be putting out the formal bids, requesting formal bids. So things are moving ahead there. I've had a few Zoom meetings. Souk Age-Friendly Committee, Souk Region Community Health Network is focused on the Better at Home program, which is through BC 211, and that's helping seniors. A couple of Souk seniors a day have been phoning in and requesting services. And the volunteers who've volunteered through BC 211 have now had their police checks done, and they're now being paired up with seniors in the community. And at the Age-Friendly Community Committee, it was noted that a lot of people are, well, first of all, that there's a lot of neighbor-to-neighbor help going on already, so that's great. But a lot of seniors are also a little shy about stepping up and asking for help. So it's been asked that we put out the word and share that this service is available. There have been some food security meetings that have been pretty fascinating, and they've led to a program that Councillor St. Pierre undoubtedly will tell us about at our next meeting. And that's about it. I'm learning how to mute and unmute myself effectively these days.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Bateman, for that update. Councillor Lajeunesse.
Nothing really to report other than kind of a feeling of helplessness lately, not being able to get out and do much, but glad to see everybody looks happy and healthy, and want to thank staff for all that you do, and glad that we have you here. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Loggins?
Nothing from me. Most of my meetings are canceled at the moment. But yes, I echo Councillor Lajeunesse. Thank you, Mr. McInnes, and all of your staff for making abrupt changes to your work environment and still going full speed ahead. That's something to be proud of.
Councillor McMath? Councillor St. Pierre?
I've been continuing to attend meetings of the Climate Caucus, and if councillors are bored, everyone's welcome. There's lots of working groups and lots to do. Food security has continued to be something that I've been working on with a number of different groups. And at this point, I'm also trying to do a little bit of work to see whether or not we can actually maintain this amazing thing we have, which is buses with free fares. Seems kind of unlikely in some ways, but yeah, it's kind of interesting that all of a sudden it's possible. Losing money like crazy, but possible. Who knows?
Yeah, the transit one is interesting. It's because of rear loading. So transit still has all the costs and no revenue coming in. So very different, a very difficult time. And then of course, service is scaled down dramatically at the moment right now. So unlikely to see free fares continue into the future, but I know a few people are always willing to reach out and make that case. All I can say for myself is just it's been really busy, and so just with numerous teleconference meetings, numerous Zoom meetings, usually starting at 8 in the morning, because for the FCM, when they're trying to pick a time, that's, you know, it's early for us, it's later in the day for others, so it's just the way it is. But a lot of ongoing work there, both obviously with the FCM and with the province, and getting a lot of media experience right now, a lot of mainland media. So that's been, I'm really grateful that we had the media training when we did, because it certainly has helped, although they don't pick every clip. So Zoom meetings, if you have a reporter doing TV reaching out to you on Zoom, it's very difficult because you have to look off in this weird place, and I don't know, it's an awkward one. So sometimes my quotes get included, sometimes they don't, but that's okay. And then of course different contact with the ministers, with our MLA, with our MP, with other elected folk and the like. So it's just a lot happening. And of course, keeping in touch with Mr. McInnes. Most of the time I'm not in the office now, just doing a lot from home and just trying to observe the social distancing, stay at home. So it's only when there's stuff now that I need to sign that I'll be in here. And then tonight, there's just too much distraction. For me, it just felt important that I'm in chamber. So it's just myself and Mr. McInnes in here with me, partly because I didn't want to be all creeped out in this building by myself. So it helps to have a bit of company here. And most certainly thinking of you. I'm glad that our regular meetings are now happening again, because there is municipal business that has to continue, pandemic or not. But we have operations that do need to continue, and we want to be able to move things along as best as we can. So I thank staff for being proactive in finding ways to do so. And then of course, on the weekends, our bylaw is very busy, but from what I heard, it was relatively quiet with residents moving around the community this weekend. There may have been a few, like it's one of those social shaming things that I don't like. So I know of a resident who had to go to the mainland to get his trailer because he had it parked on a family member's property that they had to sell. So he had to go and get it and bring it back. So right away he's labeled as a mainlander coming over to the island and is recreating. He's just bringing his own recreational vehicle home again, right? Like, and it's something that had to be done because they had their house sale. They couldn't go, it was planned, and this was the weekend that he was free and able to do it. So is unless you interview and talk to every single person, you don't necessarily know. In another case, we have young people that are having to move home now. People coming in from abroad that may be going to school abroad that have had to return home, that are, or in some cases, unable to afford rent, then they're moving home. So they have all their possessions and their things loaded up, and they're coming into town. People may not recognize them. They're not outsiders. They're members of our community. So, but overall, I think our businesses are doing the best they can, and I feel that everyone is really stepping up and doing the best they can. I think in situations like this, you see the best and worst of people, but I think in general we see the best, and that's what I'm focusing on, because if I focus on the worst, that's just a road to burnout. Anyway, if there's any questions on anything, Mr. McInnes?
Just to Councillor Bateman, the age-friendly program that they wanted to share information, did that make it to someone in the administration, do you know?
The age. No, it hasn't. That'll be up to me to follow up with you.
Perfect.
I will do that.
Okay.
Okay, so on that note, I'll look for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. So stay well, everyone. Keep healthy, keep calm, and wash your hands. Call the question on adjournment. All those in favor? Opposed? Everyone's in favor. That's carried unanimously. Okay, be well, and wonderful to see you, even in this way. All right, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Maya, do you have a sec?
There's